Yeah, I mean, I see this all the time when people, they kind of skim through the job description and they say, well, based on the title and based on these few bullet points that I see, yes, I feel like I'm qualified for this job. In our opinion, that's not enough.
Adam, welcome. How are you?
I'm great, man. Happy spring to you, David.
That's right.
It's beautiful here in Atlanta right now,
It's
isn't
been a
it?
season of nothing but rain, and here we are. Blue skies, sun, we're soaking it in.
It's gorgeous. It's great. Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. Well, welcome, guys, to the RevOps Recruiters podcast, where our mission is to provide insights and best practices around finding, hiring, and retaining top revenue operations talent.
That's right. And this is David and Adam from RevSearch, and we're your hosts.
That's right. So, Adam, what are we going to talk about today?
Today, we're going to really dive into tips around acing your RevOps interview. Last week, we talked about content that was mostly for the company. Today, it's for the candidate, right? We're going to focus on that. The reality is that we have lots of candidates that we talk to that are fantastic at their job, but they're not always comfortable at the interview process. It can be a little bit challenging. So today, our goal is to provide some tips, some best practices to help them prepare so they can really just ace that interview and get that next opportunity they're looking for.
Yeah, I think this conversation is going to be really, really critical. We see this, with candidates that, like you said, are great in their job. They're amazing operators, but then they just fall short because of that next step, that interview. Lacking connection, and we see it so often. Hiring managers saying, we just didn't have the spark.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
So today we're going to go into some information on how to prepare yourself to execute that process better.
Yeah, for sure.
So we're going to look at best practices around prior to the interview.
Yep.
We're going to look at during the interview what you can do.
Sure.
And then after the interview.
Yep.
So let's dive in. First thing we have is get to know the company.
Yeah, I mean, it matters, right? Take a little bit of time to learn what you can about the company that you're interviewing with. So check out their website, right?
Yes.
What are they about? What are their products? What are the usually what they have on their homepage is what's most important to them. So see what that is, right? Understand about them. Look at their social media. Do they even have social media? And if so, what are they saying about themselves? What's important? How are they communicating, right? They very likely have competitors. How are they trying to differentiate from their competitors? Try to see if you can pick up on that and understand what makes them different and what it makes them unique. And so if you can pick up on that, then obviously that's a point that you can have conversation with them.
Right.
And then this one's really important. Understand a little bit about the hiring manager, the person that you're going to interview with. Look at their LinkedIn profile. Try to understand a little. I promise you, they're probably looking at yours. If they're looking at yours, you should be looking at theirs. And what can you learn about this person? What matters to them? Maybe even look at some of their other social media if they have it. Try to understand a little bit about that person so that you know who you're going to be talking to when they get on that interview.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. That little step of what I hear you saying is research. Yeah. Right? In summary, research about the company, about the person you're going to interview with. I mean, I think about situations where, candidates saw something in my profile and they pointed it out prior to the interview and they said, hey, this is really interesting. And it makes you feel the fuzzies, right?
Yeah, you get a little bit of a little additional connection there.
That's
just
right.
A little bit.
That's the key word, connection. Yeah. Well, great. So we've got the research part about the company. Next, we want to look at the job description, right?
Yeah, I mean, I see this all the time when people, they kind of skim through the job description. And they say, well, based on the title and based on these few bullet points that I see, yes, I feel like I'm qualified for this job. In our opinion, that's not enough.
Yeah.
You need to go deeper with it. I want to spend time with the job description. So what I would do is I would read through it, try to understand it, then walk away for it for a little bit, and then come back to it again and read through it again. And then I'm looking for very specific things that I've done in my career, in my past, that align with what they're looking for. Yeah. So that I know and I can tell them 2 or 3 very specific ways that I'm a good fit for this role. So spend time with that job description. Don't just assume that because it says Director of RevOps that it's exactly what you're doing in your current Director of RevOps role. Yeah. Make sure you really understand that job description.
Yeah, I love this part. The first thing I think about, actually, I just remembered, I had one candidate in this. I will never forget this individual. We placed him, and he took the job description and he dissected that job description. Yeah. Bullet by bullet, he wrote what he had done that was relevant to this bullet.
To that particular,
why he had some gaps here. I mean, he went through that entire job description. He sent it to me, shared the document, and said, hey, take a look at this. I'm going to prepare for this interview. It blew my mind.
And imagine how well he was, or how well he very likely performed in that interview. And did he get that job?
He did get the job.
There you go.
Right. Now, we're not saying you have to do this. This is not the ultimate best practice, but it's engaging with that job description, right? Getting through those. Yeah.
Preparing doesn't guarantee you the role, but doing it's definitely going to get you further down the path. So prepare for it.
That's great. That's great. All right, next, technology.
Yeah, I'll tell you, man, technology is the greatest thing until it fails you. And then when it fails you, you're ready to throw a laptop out a window, right? And so I think about how many times we have been in interviews with folks and their video doesn't work.
Yes.
Their audio doesn't work. They say to us 7 minutes into this process of trying to get it, oh, I didn't realize that today's interview was on XYZ piece of technology, right?
It needed to update.
And I needed to update. I needed to download, right? That information is in the invite that was sent to you. It's going to be Zoom. It's going to be Microsoft Teams. It's going to be whatever, right? Make sure that you're ready to go for that. Test your technology. And when I say test, we're not talking about 3 minutes before. I'm talking about hours before, a day before. Be ready to go so you make sure that it doesn't fail you. The last thing you want is for you to miss out on the perfect role because Zoom doesn't work, right?
Yeah.
Don't lose it because of Zoom.
That's right. It's all about those first impressions, right? And this is just one additional piece in that first impression.
Yeah.
Right? You only get one shot.
That's right.
And when you come out, when you hop on that video call and your audio's not working, or you're going and you're doing hand signals, right? You're on the wrong foot.
Sure.
And so take that extra step and get that good impression. So what else can we do to prepare?
Yeah, I think that prior to this interview, right, you want to really think about what questions might you be asked. The reality is that a lot of the questions we get asked in interviews are very similar. They're probably going to ask you about your strengths and weaknesses, right? They might ask you about some very specific accomplishments that you've had in your career.
Yeah.
They may ask you about how did you drive impact and change within the organization that you're a part of, right? If you don't know what these questions are, ChatGPT. What are the most common questions I get asked in an interview? Go and do some research, but understand what some of those questions may be, and then have your answers already prepared. Have an idea of what you would say when you get asked that question. The last thing you want to do is when somebody asks you a question, for you to almost seem like you're caught off guard and you're not really sure what to say in that scenario. And so just be ready for the questions that may come your way.
Yeah.
A question we often see, probably one of the first questions, is just tell me a little bit about yourself, right? So the hiring manager comes in, they say, I want to get to know you a little bit. Tell me a little bit about yourself, right? Have a prepared answer there. What you don't want to do is go straight into all business and then feel like this person doesn't have any personal aspect to them. But you also don't want to say, so I was born in Atlanta, Georgia on a sleepy little street, and start your life story. So say something like, hey, my name is Adam. I'm married. I've got 4 kids, and we love the outdoors. I've been doing RevOps for this long. These are some of the things that I've done in RevOps, and this is what I'm excited about into my future career, or something like that, right? Yeah. Something that lets them know a little peek into who you are, but also mostly what you are professionally.
Yeah. I think where the disconnect can be in this area is if you don't have answers and you look like a deer in headlights.
Yeah.
I think that's what we want to avoid, and that's a good thing for candidates to think through is what are some of those common questions, and do I have a story? Do I have an example? Do I have something that I can quickly draw upon? It's like tools in your toolkit.
That's
right?
it.
It's like another tool.
Yeah.
It's another tool.
If I'm doing any project around the house, it always goes much better if I think about here's everything that I'm going to need and I get them all laid out. Yeah. Maybe I end up not ultimately needing one of those tools, but they're there. Yep. The frustrating thing is I got to run back to the garage and get this thing, run back to Home Depot and get this other thing, right? I'm not prepared. That project takes way too long. So just be prepared and have all those tools ready to go and then pull out the ones that you need.
That's right. Great. Now, another thing we want to think about is, because this is revenue operations, very complex. We've got a lot of different disciplines to cover. Yeah. There's lots of moving pieces. It's very complex. So is there benefit in talking and preparing about those different areas?
100%. I mean, I love the example that you gave just a minute ago of that candidate who dissected the job description. But even if their job description, let's say it's a little more generic. Let's say they didn't take the time to really give super detail around what they're looking for. As a candidate, I can go through and think about the RevOps function and say, okay, I know that CRM and technology is going to be a part of it. Yeah. So how do I approach that? What have I done? Yeah. Have a category there. I know data analysis is going to be a part of it. Yeah. How do I approach data? Yeah. What do I think is important, right? Yeah. Document some of that. I know that project management matters. Sometimes external project management, sometimes just managing everything that's coming my way as a RevOps person inside of an organization. So this is how I keep leadership informed. This is how I keep everybody updated. This is how I prioritize the projects that are in front of me. Have a plan. Change management, EQ. This is how I go about getting people on board. This is how I build rapport with other leaders within the organization, right? Have an idea of that, because very likely you're going to get asked questions. So be ready to unpack those.
So another thing I think about when we're covering that is big picture versus granular, right? So strategy versus tactical. How strategic and tactical do you want to be in your interview? Yeah,
it's a great question. The tactics, you very likely have used tactics in the past, but the tactics you used in your current role or a previous role may not be the exact tactics that they're going to need in that current job that you're applying for. So I'd say focus most of your time on strategy. This is how I broke down the problem. This is how I looked at this scenario. And then I applied the appropriate tactics to it. If they want to know more about the tactics, they'll probably ask you some things about that, but they probably want to know more likely what's your strategy? How do you approach a problem or a challenge? And so I'd focus more of your time on the strategy side of it.
Yeah, exactly. That life cycle of here's the big picture, here was the strategy, here are the steps I took, here's the impact, right? Leading someone through that and creating those light bulb moments. I love that. That's great. Great. So we've covered the prior to the interview best practices.
Right.
Let's go into during the interview. What do we need to think about there?
I think first thing, you talked about first impressions, right? We talked about being prepared, but then to that is present yourself well. So how are you dressing? I know, the days of wearing suits and ties are probably not, especially in a RevOps function, there's probably not an expectation you're going to show up in a suit and a tie. Tuxedo, probably overdressed. But I have seen situations where people are what I would consider far underdressed. They show up in a t-shirt. They're not really, to me, they're not presenting well, right? You probably want to be moderately professionally dressed in these scenarios. So just think about that. It does matter. I know that you may not in the role have to show up every day that way once you get the role, but realize that you're trying to get the role, you don't already have it. So look presentable. What does your video look like? So for example, if I'm sitting in front of a very bright window, that means the window is going to be bright and my face is going to be dark. So situate the video in a way that you as the interviewer can see my face well, right? Frame myself well. And my face should take up the majority of the frame, right? So frame myself well. Think about the space, whether you're going to have an actual background or you're going to have a virtual background. If it's an actual background, pick it up a little bit, right? Make it look nice and presentable. If it's virtual, better off probably just with a blurred background than going into, hey, this is an island retreat on Tahiti or this is the slopes in Colorado, right? Just pick a neutral blurred background so it's not a distraction.
Or your face coming out of the clouds. I love those.
Those exactly.
Excellent. So dress code, obviously, I mean, lots of thoughts there. We don't have to go into a whole lot of detail. I've had the entire spectrum, right?
I think you said a Batman.
We've had pajama tops. We've had someone who looked like they were in a cave somewhere in the dark, couldn't even see their face. Got some really weird vibes from that, right? So stay away from that. You can do simple things to present yourself well and to have that connection and not create some weird feelings right out of the gate. Right. What about distractions?
I mean, here's the thing. Many of us have kids, we have pets. We can't control 100% of the environment around us, but that doesn't mean we can't control some percentage of the environment around us, right? So if you're going into an interview, I love my dogs. If you have pets, you probably love them. Take them out of the room that you're in at the moment of the interview, right? I've literally had it where I'm interviewing somebody and a cat jumped onto like their keyboard and was between the two of us on camera. And I'm thinking, we could have prevented that, right? Or I couldn't have, but they could have put the cat in another room. Cats, dogs, whatever. Kids, have a plan. If you're at home working from home, make sure everybody knows that you're going to be on an interview, right? And then if you know that there's the possibility for some distraction, there's great technology that's really cheap or free that you can use. We use a thing called Crisp, which completely blocks out. I can clap right here and you can't hear it, but I can speak and you can hear it, right? And so it can remove background noises. There's tools that you can use.
That's right. Really no excuse with the amount of tools that are out there. You can find a solution for pretty much everything nowadays. Well, great. So we've talked about the presentation aspect of the interview. Let's talk about, we're dealing with a person here. So Read the room?
Read it. Yeah. I mean, the thing is that if we're aware of the other person in the room, we're picking up on cues. Like, first of all, am I connecting with this person?
Right.
Does it seem like I'm connecting, right? I'm trying my best. Listen, I've been in interviews where the interviews were tough and you're thinking, I have no idea. But I've also been in interviews where the person's giving me a lot of visual cues, a lot of nonverbal cues, and I know, hey, I'm connecting. And if I feel like I'm not, I'm going to try to find a way that I can. Right. I'm also going to see, does it seem like my answers are too short or too long? If they keep asking, hey, can you tell me a little bit more? Can you tell me a little bit more? My answers are probably a little too short.
Yeah.
If it seems like they're disconnecting, distracted, or checking out while I'm answering, maybe my answers are a little too long. And so I'm going to try to pick up on what's happening with this individual and understand the situation.
Yeah, the golden ratio for us is what? 50% talking, 50% listening, kind of that balance, and then navigate that and see what's going on. Feel that out.
Yeah, exactly. Right. A lot of times they're going to tell you a little bit about the company and the vision and the values. And so they're talking some, and then they're going to ask some questions. And so, yeah, a good balance of conversation. The other thing is realize that they very likely have a number of questions they want to get through. And so if you're halfway through the interview and they've asked one question,
red flag.
They're probably going to be a little bit frustrated when they're done, where they say, man, I really wanted to get through all these things. So you may think, hey, I'm connecting. But maybe you're sharing too much information. Let them ask the questions that they want to ask so that you can give them the answers that they want, that they hopefully are wanting to hear for this role.
Yeah. And this may change from person to person, right? You might have an interviewee that's looking to just get their questions answered, and they might lead in like that, or they might lead in very open-handed and saying, all right, let's start having a conversation. Yeah. But be ready, read the room. That's right. That's a really good point.
Yeah.
Next thing is, how are you answering questions, right? Answering questions. What are we talking about?
So we've already prepared for them, but be specific.
Yeah.
Be detailed enough that they understand that you know what you're talking about, but don't wander. Yeah. Don't meander. You don't want to be 20 minutes in and still on question number 1, right?
Yeah.
So realize that they very likely have those questions they want to get through, so let them have the time to do that.
Great. The next thing is around asking questions.
Yeah, I think one of the worst things that you can do in an interview is they get to the end, the interviewer says to you, hey, appreciate your time. Before we go, let me just take a moment. Are there any questions that you have?
Yeah.
Probably the worst thing you could say is, I don't have any questions, or you answered all my questions, because you answered all my questions is really just, I don't have any questions, right?
Right.
So be prepared with a couple of questions to ask. The best case scenario would be during your research time, you saw some things that you're genuinely curious about. Hey, tell me about, I saw this, tell me about it.
Yeah.
And so if you've got very specific things, great. If not, there's some great generic questions that you could ask. Tell me about a challenge that you're facing right now as a business, and how is this role going to help to address that challenge?
Yeah.
Great question.
It's a great question.
Let them speak to it. Tell me about what your expectations are of the person in this role in the first 90 days. What 2 or 3 things would have the greatest impact? Let them share a little bit about that.
Yeah.
Ask them what the onboarding process looks like. What is the training process? Have some questions.
Yeah.
Have something that you could ask. You should have 2 or 3 questions that you've got prepared at that point to ask of that person. And it's going to make them seem like, okay, not only are you prepared and interested, but that you're engaged enough that you brought something to that conversation as well.
Yeah, you care.
Yeah.
Right? Bottom line, you care about this opportunity. You care about the organization. You want to know more.
That's right.
And that builds that confidence in the process.
For sure.
Great. So we've talked about prior to the interview, during the interview. Let's talk about after the interview.
So this seems like such a small thing, right? But just taking the time to send a note, thanking them for their time, telling them that you're still interested in the role, how much you appreciated that, right? I've never seen a scenario where that got someone the job, but I've seen scenarios where that prohibited them from getting the job. We've had hiring managers come back to us and say, hey, we kind of like this person, but I thought it was odd that I didn't even get a follow-up from them.
Right.
They didn't mention anything about, other questions that they have or ask about next steps in the process. So show some genuine interest in and appreciation, right? You both took time. It mattered. It took something from both of you to participate in that, but show some interest and appreciation in that. Hit them up on LinkedIn, thank them for the time, send them an email. Again, that's not going to land the job, but it could be the difference between you and one other person where they said, well, this other person at least thanked me and said, hey, I'm looking forward to the next steps and can't wait to keep this process going. And the other one I didn't hear anything from.
Yeah. Yeah. An example I'm thinking about right out of the gate is, we recently had a candidate where our client said, hey, we're time out. We're done. We don't want to interview any more candidates at this point. We communicate that with the candidate, and the candidate comes back, takes initiative, writes us an email and says, here's why I'd like to interview with them and why, I think you should communicate with them. Get me this interview.
Right.
And I went, okay. Well, I'm going to go talk to the hiring manager, and guess what?
Well, and we had 3 actually candidates, and we told all 3 of them, and only one of them came back and said that. And we brought it back to the person, and they said, you know what? Yes, I will interview.
I like that.
And that person got the interview.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
I don't know if they got the job or not, but it got them the interview.
Yeah. So this simple touch, this initiative, right? It's all part of this process.
That's right.
Of building confidence and maybe getting that next step.
Yeah.
So great. Well, we've talked about a lot of best practices here around what you can do prior to, during, and after the interview. I think people are set up for some success. And
for sure. I mean, great. Take these things, utilize them. Not everyone is a great interviewer, but you can always get better, and hopefully these tools will help you get better. So thank you guys for checking out the podcast. You can certainly find us on YouTube. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get those. Check out the RevOps Recruiters, and we hope you'll subscribe, follow us, and we'll go from there.